We're going to begin learning about the integumentary system by looking at the basic parts. So here is a cross-section of a typical area of skin. You have up at the top here the epidermis. So we can label it in the picture and then go write a little more information below. So epidermis is the top layer of skin. And it is keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. So think of the Chapter 5 flashcards you've been doing where you've been learning tissue types. Your surface of your skin, epidermis, is the keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. Then below the epidermis, you have dermis. So this is the main part of skin. Dermis is the bottom layer of skin. And it is made of two tissues. The top part of the dermis where you have these little bumps here, those little bumps are called dermal papillae. So this is the papillary layer of dermis. So the dermis is split into two layers. It has a papillary, which is made of areolar connective tissue. And areolar connective tissue binds things together. So it's there holding your epidermis to your dermis. Kind of think of it like glue. Then all the rest of it, all this part of dermis, is the reticular layer. And the reticular layer is made of dense irregular connective tissue. And this is what gives skin its strength and flexibility. Then if we keep going down, here you have the hypodermis, which can also be called subcutaneous. If you break these words down, hypo means less or below. So this just literally means below the dermis. Sub also means below. Think of like a submarine. It's a boat that goes below the surface of the ocean. And cutaneous means skin. So this is not part of your skin, but it's what's below your skin. And it has two types of tissue. The yellow stuff that you see here is adipose, which is just the scientific way of saying body fat. So you have a layer of fat just beneath your skin. And then it also has the areolar connective tissue. And this is what holds your skin to your body. Now, all of this that we've done so far, we're going to have more detail later. This is just the introduction and the overview. Each of these things, we're going to have later sections in the notes where we go into more detail on this. Now let's label some of these structures. You have a lot of structures in your dermis. The dermis has many structures. So let's label some of these. So we have here a hair follicle. And this is the living part. what you see here down in the dermis. Up here are your hair shafts. This part is not living. This is dead cells. So that's why it doesn't hurt to get a haircut, because the part that's up above your skin is already dead. We also have connected to that an arrector pili muscle. So you can kind of see right here and then right here. Connected to your hair follicles are arrector pili muscles. This is what gives you goosebumps. So if you're cold, or like something makes you really scared, or sometimes if you're really angry, like strong emotions or being cold will cause those muscles to contract, and that makes the hair stand up and you get a goosebump. You have sweat glands. This right here is a Merocrine sweat gland. Now you have another type of sweat gland that's not shown in this picture, and that is the apocrine sweat gland. The Merocrine sweat gland is shown here because it occurs all over your body. The apocrine sweat gland is not included in this picture because you only have apocrine sweat glands in a few places of the body. All these yellow things here, such as here and here, these are sensory receptors. So your skin can feel a lot of things. It can feel touch, pain, pressure, temperature. We also have blood vessels. And blood vessels everywhere in your body are there to nourish. They're taking nutrients and oxygen. They're picking up carbon dioxide and waste. The blood vessels in your skin do that, plus they have a second function, which is thermoregulation. When you're hot, they dilate to bring more blood to your skin so you can release heat. And when you're cold, they constrict to keep blood away from your skin to keep you warm. So your muscles are what make your body heat, and then your blood distributes it. So as your blood flows through your muscles, it gets hotter, it picks up the heat from the muscles, then your blood flows around in the rest of your body and distributes that heat. And when you have extra heat to get rid of, you send that blood to the surface of your skin and it distributes that heat to the air around you. Another thing attached to the hair follicle is a sebaceous gland. So in this picture right here, you can see it whole. And then here's a cross section of it. This is what makes the oil for your skin. And you have these little kind of squiggly purple lines going through the skin. These are sweat gland ducts. That's how the sweat gets up to the surface of the skin. And wherever the sweat gland duct connects, like right here, you're going to have a sweat pore, a little hole in the skin for the sweat to come out of. So this is a basic introduction, an overview of what's in your skin. And as we go through this chapter, we're going to have sections where we go through more detail on each of these. A quick note before you start the notes on this section. The layer that is labeled stratum spinosum, when I first did the notes, I accidentally called that stratum granulosum. I later caught my mistake and changed it. If you don't want to have to erase or use whiteout or scratch something out, go ahead and label the pink part there stratum spinosum. Don't mislabel it granulosum. Now we'll start going into more detail on these sections of skin, and we're going to begin with the epidermis. So this picture is an up close of the epidermis. So if we come back up here and compare, This area right here is what we are looking at in this picture. It's an up close of that epidermis. And remember here we had the dermal papillae, these little bumps here of dermis that come up into the epidermis. This is that dermal papillae. So we're going to focus on the epidermis now. And remember, the epidermis is keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. And that keratin is a tough, water-resistant protein. So the whole point of the epidermis is protection. The epidermis is kind of like a helmet on a football player. It's this tough outer layer that protects. It's also waterproof, so you're not losing water out of your body. Remember, we've already talked about in chapter 2 with the balloons in lab how your body is mostly water. You don't want to lose that water. Notice also that there are no blood vessels in the epidermis. So that means it is avascular. When you put A in front of a word, that means without, and then vascular means blood vessels. This is also part of the protection. One way this protects you is that it helps prevent infection. If you get infection in your blood, that can kill you. And there are lots of germs. So the world is full of germs. You have germs out here all over the place. Germs are constantly trying to get into you. By having no blood vessels in your epidermis, you put this whole barrier between the outside world that's full of germs and your blood. Another reason to not have blood vessels in the epidermis is because then you would bleed all the time. You're constantly bumping into things, scraping against things, things touching your skin. The epidermis takes a lot of damage. And it doesn't bleed all the time because there's no blood there. If you had blood vessels in your epidermis, every little bump, every little scrape would bleed. So this also prevents blood loss from small things. An epidermis is divided into layers. And we're going to start at the bottom and work our way up and go through the layers of the epidermis and the type of cells in each layer. And one thing to keep in mind is that the top is always falling off. You can see right here, this cell is about to fall off. Your skin is constantly being regenerated. The surface of your skin in general is about 30 to 45 days old. So you're always making new cells at the bottom, and they migrate up to the top, and when they get to the top, they die and fall off. And this is a constant process. Like you might have heard of facial products that exfoliate. The whole point of exfoliating is taking off that top dead layer. So we're going to start with the bottom layer where new cells are being made. And that bottom layer is called the stratum basale. So we're going to use a different color for each layer. And I'll outline the layer so you can see it. So our bottom layer is stratum basale. And there are 3 types of cells that occur here. So most of them are keratinocytes. All these pink cells you see are keratinocytes. This is just a general skin cell. Keratinocyte is just the scientific name for skin cell. And in the stratum basale, this is where they do mitosis. Like if you look right here, there's one doing mitosis. This is where they do cell division. To make new skin cells. So the skin that's falling off at the top is being replaced because of cell division occurring in the stratum basale. Then you also have this brown cell here. So there's one here, there's another one here, they're scattered all around. These are melanocytes. You may have heard of melanin, which is your skin color. So melanocytes make melanin. Melanin is a protein that gives you your skin color. And the purpose of your skin color is to protect you from UV light. So that's what melanin does. It protects you from the damaging UV light. And in a later section, we're going to look in a lot more detail at UV light and melanin and how it's protecting you and what's going on with all that. And when it makes the melanin, it packages it in a melanosome. So a melanosome is just a package of melanin. And then if you look closely at these cells, see how they have these little extensions? Right? And down here, see all these extensions that go out among the keratinocytes? The melanocyte doesn't keep the melanin for itself. After it makes it and packages it, it gives it to your keratinocytes. So that's how your skin color ends up here at the surface of your skin where you can see it, because it's put into the keratinocytes, and the keratinocytes are the ones that are migrating upward. So your melanocytes make your skin color, but your keratinocytes contain your skin color. Then the third cell in the stratum basale is this one right here. So it's this blue cell, and then notice it's attached to this yellow stalk. The cell is a tactile cell. And that yellow stalk it's attached to is a nerve. So this is your sense of touch. So these are the cells that detect whenever something touches your skin, and they send a signal through that nerve to the brain. And one of the things we're going to do in lab is to map your tactile cells. They're not evenly distributed throughout your body. So I'm going to go ahead and explain that so you'll understand it when you do it in lab. Let's say we're comparing two different sections of skin. Each of these squares is a section of skin from a different area on the body. You could have some areas of the body where you have lots of tactile cells and they're really close to each other. So each little dot I'm making here represents a tactile cell. You have other areas of your body where you only have a few of them and they're spread really far apart. So not all areas of your body have the same sensitivity. We're going to do a lab activity where you're going to poke different areas of the skin. So if we have 2 points set distance apart, and you touch the skin with those 2 points, if this comes down and it touches the skin and one touches here and one touches there, that means that 2 different tactile cells were touched. So you will send 2 signals to your brain. And your brain will feel 2 things. So you will say, oh, I felt 2 different things touch me. If you come over to this other area of skin, where you only have a few tactile cells and they're spread apart, they have territories. So they would split your skin like this. They would have their territories. This caliper comes down and it touches here like this. Even though it's 2 separate points that touched you, they both touched in the same territory. Only this one is going to signal the brain. So your brain will get 1 signal. And even though it was 2 different things that touched you, you will only feel 1. Okay, we can move the caliper apart. We could make it go like here and then put the other point clear over here. As long as they're in the same territory, you will still only feel 1 thing. You have to get the caliper so that the 2 points are in 2 different territories. And if you can get the 2 points in 2 different territories, then you will feel 2 things. And that's what you're going to do in lab. You're going to have this caliper that has these 2 points and you can adjust how far apart they are. You can touch different parts of the skin and see if you feel 1 thing or 2 things, and you can map out where your sensory receptors are by doing that. All right, so that's the stratum basale. And the main thing here is this is where you're making your new cells that are going to migrate to the top. You have your melanocytes that make the melanin, but then give it to these new cells so that the melanin is in your keratinocytes and works its way up to the top, and you have your sense of touch here. Okay, then if we move up another layer, this part is the stratum granulosum. So notice the basale is wavy, the bottom of the granulosum is wavy, but now by the time we get to the top of the granulosum, it's just flat. So let's talk for just a minute about those waves. It is wavy at the bottom here. That is called epidermal ridges. And these are what interlock with the dermal papillae so that you keep your epidermis and your dermis together. This is also the source of your fingerprints. All right, so let's get back now to the stratum granulosum. So this layer is mostly keratinocytes. Again, everywhere in the skin is going to be either mostly or all keratinocytes. And here the keratinocytes, these are new cells that were just made in the basale, and they moved up. They're going to connect to each other. Your skin is one continuous sheet over your whole entire body. That's because all these cells are linked to their neighbors. It's kind of like they all join arms together. And these connections that they form are called desmosomes. Think about the button on your pants. That is what a desmosome is like. The desmosome connects two neighboring cells to each other. So all around, they're forming several desmosomes with all of their neighbors so that they're all connected together. And this is what makes your skin one continuous sheet of tissue. Then you have this yellow cell here. This is an epidermal dendritic cell. So also in the stratum granulosum, you have epidermal dendritic cells. This is an immune cell. Remember, there's germs all over outside. You're surrounded by germs, and you have to keep them out of your body. Well, sometimes germs will try to crawl in through your skin. The epidermal dendritic cell is like a bodyguard. It's there to stop any germs that do try to crawl in through your skin. So if a germ does try to crawl in, the epidermal dendritic cell will kill it, and it will alert the rest of your immune system. This is the stratum spinosum, not the stratum granulosum. Stratum granulosum is next, so I am sorry for that. Change that to spinosum. So now we have stratum granulosum. So stratum granulosum, all we have now are keratinocytes. There's no other types of cells. Remember, these cells are moving up, so they've moved up from the basale, from the spinosum to the granulosum. This is where they start to make keratin. Remember, the epidermis is keratinized cells. So far, they haven't had any keratin, but this is where the keratinocytes begin to make keratin. And they fill themselves up with it. So they don't secrete it out, they keep it inside themselves. Then the next layer that we move up to is the stratum lucidum. And this layer is not necessarily found all over the body. It's only in certain parts. So this is stratum lucidum. So this is where the cells have, or the keratinocytes have, a protein called ellatin. So this is a protein that is an intermediate of keratin. So it's a protein that's on its way to becoming keratin, but it's not keratin yet. And this protein is significant because it completely blocks UV light. So it is a light color, it's kind of a white protein. And it blocks UV light. So no UV can get through this protein. And stratum lucidum does not occur everywhere on the body. It's only 2 places on the body. And that's why this picture is here. The 2 places where you have stratum lucidum are the palm of the hands and the soles of the feet. And if you think about it for a minute, it said that the protein is a light color, it's white. So the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet are always a lighter shade than the rest of the skin. Even people who have really dark skin, their palms and soles are much lighter. So the palms and soles are always going to be lighter than the rest of the skin because of this white ellatin that's there. And these 2 areas are completely protected from UV. You've probably never had a sunburn on the palms of your hands or the soles of your feet. UV can't penetrate these areas. And these areas that have stratum lucidum are called thick skin because they have this extra layer in the epidermis. So the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet are thick skin. They have stratum lucidum. All right, then we go on to the very top layer. All this up here is the stratum corneum. So this is the dead cells on the surface. So the top layer of your skin is dead. And this is really helpful. This protects you. You can't feel what happens there. It's dead, so it can't be hurt. It's tough. It can't be infected because it's already dead. And it's just this protective surface layer. And the cells on the surface constantly fall off. That makes it somewhat self-cleaning because when they fall off, whatever dirt and germs are on there fall off with them. And think about if you've ever had a burn or a blister that tore open. You know how you can see kind of that pinkish, tender skin underneath? That's what it's like if you lose the stratum corneum. So think about, a burn and how you can see that pinkish, tender skin. Just barely touching it hurts. It's very prone to bleeding. You have blood vessels right there on the surface. Imagine if you didn't have the dead surface of your skin, that's what your whole body would be like. Any little touch would hurt. It would bleed very easily. You would have no protection. So the whole point of the corneum is kind of this tough protection that doesn't hurt every time you touch it. So there is the epidermis. Now we can look in more detail at the dermis. So the dermis has two layers. Up here where you have all these bumps is the papillary layer. The papillary layer of dermis, remember, is made of areolar connective tissue. And this tissue is like the glue of the body. Anywhere you see in the body where you have areolar connective tissue, think of binding. It's always going to bind. So this is what binds the epidermis to the dermis. Okay, then also the shape. You have these bumps that lock into these grooves here. So the papillary layer interlocks with the epidermis. And again, that is to hold them together. So the fact that it's areolar connective tissue and that it's bumpy to interlock with the epidermis is what holds epidermis and dermis together. And this can fail. If you have a lot of friction, like say you get new shoes and they're rubbing your heels, that can fail. When this fails to hold together, that is when you get a blister. So a blister is the epidermis separated from the dermis. Then below that, we have the reticular layer. This is the thickest part. So reticular is from here all the way to here. And reticular layer contains the structures of the skin, which we already labeled earlier. It also has those blood vessels for thermoregulation. So remember, if you are hot, they will dilate to release heat. And if you are cold, they will constrict to conserve heat. And the reticular layer is made of dense irregular connective tissue. So you have dense connective tissues have collagen fibers. So you've probably heard of this. A lot of wrinkle creams claim that they restore your collagen. So your reticular layer of dermis is full of collagen. And as you get older, that collagen breaks down and you get wrinkles. So collagen is a protein. And whenever we say a fiber of protein, that means it's a long strand. So the collagen is these long strands of protein. So in your dermis, you have these long strands of protein that are collagen fibers. There's two types of dense connective tissues, regular and irregular. We'll go ahead and draw two here so you can see the difference. Regular, all the collagen fibers are parallel. In irregular, you have some that crisscross like this. So that's the difference between dense regular and dense irregular. In regular, they're all parallel, they don't cross each other. In irregular, you do have some that cross others. They're not necessarily all in straight lines. Collagen fibers are strong. In regular, you have strength in the direction they run. However, in the other direction that they don't run, it is weak. This would be like your tendons and ligaments. If you twist your ankle, you'll tear the tendons and ligaments in there, and that's a sprain because they're strong in the direction they're meant to be pulled. If you twist your ankle, you pull them in the direction that they're weak, and then they tear. With your skin has to move in all directions. Think about it. Every time your body moves, your skin is stretching and moving with you. And you can move your body parts in lots of different directions, so you need your skin to be able to move with you in different directions. So skin is irregular. Your dermis is irregular. Because you have collagen fibers that run in all directions, your skin is strong in all directions. It's because of these irregular collagen fibers in your dermis that your skin doesn't tear when you move. Then the hypodermis, we can look a little more at it. So the hypodermis has two tissues. It also has the areolar connective, which again, remember, it's like the glue of your body. It holds things together. And this time it holds your skin to your body. If you didn't have this, your skin would just kind of be like clothes. It would just hang on you, but not really be attached to you. It's also full of adipose. So you have that layer of fat just under your skin. And this adipose serves some functions. For one thing, it insulates to keep you warm. It also cushions to protect your internal organs and all the structures inside you. Think about if somebody's going to punch you and you grab a pillow and you use that pillow to cushion yourself. That's what all this fat is. It's this built-in cushion all around your body. And it stores energy. So if if the zombie apocalypse ever happens and you can't get food for a while, you can just live off of that subcutaneous fat. Now let's go on and look a little more at sweat glands. Remember in the first picture I said there were two types of sweat glands, the merocrine and the apocrine. So we're going to compare these to each other now. The purple one here is a merocrine sweat gland. And notice it has a duct that goes to a pore on the surface of the skin. So first we'll talk about the merocrine sweat glands. So merocrine, one thing about them is they have a duct to the surface of the skin. And this sweat functions in thermoregulation. Remember in the chapter 2 lab where we had the flower pots and you got one wet and it got cold, and the whole point of that was that's how your body uses evaporation of water to cool itself when you sweat? This is the merocrine sweat glands. They cool you when you are hot. So the whole idea is they put sweat on the surface of your skin. That sweat evaporates. Evaporation breaks the hydrogen bonds in water, and you have to use the heat from your body to break those hydrogen bonds to allow the sweat to evaporate. So this sweat is mostly water. It does have some electrolytes. That's why we have Gatorade. So if you are exercising and working out and sweating a lot, you can drink Gatorade to replace the electrolytes that you lost. There is some waste in it. So this sweat will contain a little bit of urea, which urea is also what's found in urine. It also has lysozyme. Lysozyme inhibits pathogens from growing on your skin. So pathogens are germs that will cause disease. So the world is full of germs. Not all of them make you sick. Pathogens are ones that will make you sick. So the lysozyme inhibits pathogen growth on your skin. And these sweat glands are found everywhere on your body, and you have lots of them. You have about 2 million of them. And they are all over your body. So every body part can sweat. Then we look at the apocrine glands. This pink one here is an apocrine gland. Notice that it has a duct, but its duct goes to the hair. And then the hair is what distributes it to the surface of the skin. So apocrine sweat does not have its own duct to the surface of the skin. It has a duct to a hair, and then it relies on the hair to get up to the surface of the skin. And these sweat glands are not located all over their body. They are only located in certain areas. And those areas are the armpits, genitals, nipples, and anus. Another thing about these sweat glands is they don't become active until puberty. So they are dormant until puberty. So make a connection here. At puberty is when these glands become active. And at puberty is when you get genital and armpit hair. So that hair is what distributes the sweat to the skin. This sweat does not function in thermal regulation. It has a different composition and a different purpose. So it is also made of water, but in addition to the water, it also has lots of lipids and proteins. And the main purpose of this sweat is that it has pheromones. So you may have heard of pheromones. Pheromones are involved in attraction. So this all goes together. You get these sweat glands, well, you have them your whole life. They become active at puberty, and puberty is when the body's getting ready to reproduce. And pheromones are what attract a mate. So think about other animals and pheromones. It's not just humans. All mammals have them. So think about dogs, right? When a dog is in heat, every male dog in the neighborhood knows, and they come looking for that female dog in heat. That's the pheromones that do that. The female dog in heat is giving off lots of pheromones, and the male dogs can detect that. Now, it's not really smell, it's like smell. Humans do have a structure in the nose to detect pheromones. But it's not the same as smell. When you smell something, you're consciously aware of it. You can describe and recognize different smells consciously. This is more on a subconscious level. So you do detect pheromones in other people, but more on a subconscious level. And if you think about dogs again, even the female in heat gives off a lot of pheromones, but they're always giving them off. And notice that this is also in the anus. Well, that's why dogs smell each other's butts. They're smelling each other's pheromones. And that's why dogs sometimes, like you meet a new dog, you go to a friend's house and they keep wanting to sniff your crotch because that's where your pheromones are and they want to smell your pheromones. So this does play a role in attraction. Now, in humans, there are a lot of factors that go into being attracted to somebody, but the pheromones do play a role in that. An interesting study that was done, some researchers took a group of men and a group of women. They gave the women t-shirts and had them wear those t-shirts for a few days so that their pheromones got on them. Then they took each t-shirt, put it in its own sealed Ziploc bag, and put just a number on it. So only the researchers knew which woman's t-shirt was in which bag. Then they gave these t-shirts in the Ziploc bags to the group of men, and they had them smell each t-shirt. And just based on smelling the t-shirt, they had the men write down which ones they were attracted to. So the man would sit there, he'd have all these t-shirts in Ziploc bags, he'd open the Ziploc bag, he'd smell the shirt, and he would write down the number on the bag if he felt like he was attracted to that t-shirt. Then later, they hosted a party and had all these men and women meet each other. And after the party, they took the men and they said, which women were you attracted to that you met at the party? And the men wrote down the names of the women they were attracted to. Well, then the researchers compared the list of numbers from the bags of t-shirts to the names from the party. And it turns out they matched up. So if a woman wrote down that he was attracted to t-shirt number 3 based on smelling it, and then he went to the party and he met the woman whose t-shirt that was, at the end of the party, he wrote down her name that he was attracted to her. Another place where you can actually see this in action is when women live together. When a group of women live together, their menstrual cycles will synchronize. This is because they're smelling each other's pheromones all the time. Now remember, it's not technically smell, but it's in your nose. So anyway, when women live together or spend a lot of time together, they're inhaling each other's pheromones all the time, and that will actually cause their menstrual cycles to synchronize with each other. So that's a pretty powerful impact from this. Okay, a few other things that go along with this. Notice that this sweat contains lipids and proteins. Two implications of the lipids and proteins. American sweat is clear. It's water with a little bit of electrolytes. Lipids and proteins are not clear. Lipids and proteins tend to give a yellow color. That is why you get pit stains on your shirts. It's the lipids from this sweat get into the cloth and they stain the cloth yellow. This is also why you get body odor. This is why you need deodorant once you go through puberty. Lipids and proteins are food. Bacteria live on your skin. So the bacteria on your skin will eat the lipids and proteins from the sweat. And whenever bacteria eat, they produce waste, right? Anything that eats has to produce waste. If you eat food, you poop. So then the waste from the bacteria is what smells bad. That's where body odor comes from. That's why you wear deodorant, to prevent this. One more implication here. Apocrine sweat has lipids and proteins, which are food. Well, it's not just bacteria that eat lipids and proteins. We need lipids and proteins also. Milk is a modified apocrine sweat. Mammary glands are, you take an apocrine gland, you modify it a little bit, and you get a mammary gland, and it makes milk. But milk is just a modified form of apocrine sweat. So like if you go to the grocery store and buy milk, you're basically drinking cow sweat. And mothers with their babies, that's a modified form of sweat when you breastfeed a baby. So kind of interesting to think about. You've been having cow sweat on your cereal all this time. Now we're going to look in a little more detail at melanin and what function it serves for you. So remember, this is the stratum basale. That bottom layer of epidermis. So remember from the previous picture where you labeled the layers of epidermis, find the stratum basale there. That's what we're looking at. And remember, this cell is a melanocyte. So a melanocyte will make melanin. And melanin is a protein. And melanin comes in different colors. So this is where your skin color comes from. Once it makes that melanin, it packages it in a melanosome. And then it gives it to your keratinocytes. So all of the pink cells here are keratinocytes, and you see all of these little dots inside of them? Those are the melanosomes. And the function of melanin is to protect you from UV. So you probably are familiar with, if you go out and spend too much time in the sun, you can get a burn from that. That's the UV light that's in sunlight that can burn you. That's also what's in tanning beds, is UV light. So UV light is both good and bad for you. First, we'll look at why UV light is bad for you. UV light damages your DNA. And this can lead to cancer. So this is why you can get skin cancer if you spend too much time in the sun, because all that UV light will damage your DNA and cause cancer. The other bad thing UV light does to you is it destroys folic acid. Folic acid is also known as folate, so same thing. You may have heard of this. This is a nutrient that you get from your food. Especially leafy green vegetables have lots of folate in them. So it's a nutrient that you need. And one of the most important things this nutrient does for you is it allows you to reproduce. Women need plenty of folic acid when they are pregnant. If a pregnant woman doesn't have enough folic acid, so if she lacks folic acid, that will cause her to either have a miscarriage or the baby will be born with birth defects. So it's very important that pregnant women get lots of folic acid. And that's why today doctors prescribe vitamins to women who are pregnant to make sure they're getting lots of folic acid so they can carry the pregnancy and have a healthy baby. In men, it is needed to make healthy sperm. So UV does two bad things. It can give you cancer and it can take away your ability to reproduce. UV is also good for you though. You may know that when you go out in the sun, your skin makes vitamin D. So UV is what does that. UV stimulates your keratinocytes to convert cholesterol to vitamin D. So you eat cholesterol, cholesterol's in your food. That's how you get cholesterol. Then it goes to your skin, and then the sun stimulates your skin to convert cholesterol to vitamin D. So I emphasize that it's your skin converting cholesterol to vitamin D because sometimes people want to think that you absorb vitamin D from sunlight. That is not true. There are no vitamins in sunlight. Please do not make yourself sound like an idiot and go walking around saying, oh, you absorb vitamin D from sunlight. No, you don't. The sun stimulates you to convert the cholesterol you ate to vitamin D. There are no vitamins in sunlight. So, back to melanin. The amount of melanin you need is a balance between the good and the bad. So if you think of like a teeter-totter, you have to have balance. There is the bad parts of UV and the good parts of UV. You need just enough melanin to keep a balance between these. So you need just the right amount of melanin. You need enough to protect you from cancer and destroying your folic acid. So you need enough to protect your DNA and your folate, but not too much that you block your ability to make vitamin D. If you had too much melanin, you couldn't make vitamin D. So your body adjusts. You need just the right amount. And there are two ways that your body adjusts. So there are two factors that determine your melanin. So one is genetic. You inherit the color and your baseline production. So the minimum amount that you're going to make from your parents. And this is based on where your ancestors evolved. And when I refer to ancestors here, I'm talking about like 20,000 years ago ancestors, not recent ancestors. So if you trace your ancestry back about 20,000 years, if your ancestors were in an area with high UV, such as near the equator, there's more UV light at the equator, then you need lots of dark melanin to protect you from all that UV light. If your ancestors 20,000 years ago evolved far from the equator, either far north or far south, there is very little UV light here. So you only need a small amount of light melanin. This way you can make vitamin D. Even though there's only a little bit of sunlight there, you're still able to make enough vitamin D to keep yourself alive if you have just a small amount of light melanin. Okay, so genetic. But not everybody today lives where their ancestors lived 20,000 years ago. So your own body can also adjust based on your UV exposure. Right, so this is what happens in the summer. In the summer, if you're out in the sun more, you make more melanin. Then in the winter, you're not out in the sun so much, you make less. And this is what these pictures show. So in the summertime, when your skin is exposed to more UV light, it gets darker because you make more melanin in response. So you can see here the areas of skin exposed to more sunlight have more melanin. And in lab, we're going to watch a video that's going to explain a little more about this, the balancing act you do between UV light and the amount of melanin. So let's go on and look at another function of skin, which is protecting you from infection. So there are several features of your skin here that are going to protect you from infection because that's one of the main jobs of your skin. So first of all, on the surface of your skin, you have what's called the acid mantle. You have your sweat glands making sweat, your sebaceous glands making oil. Those two substances get to the surface of your skin and they mix together. So this is where you mix your sweat and oil. And when you mix those, it forms an acid. And this acid inhibits the growth of pathogens on your skin. Each of these substances individually are also helping to protect your skin. So remember, here is your sebaceous gland. This is what makes the oil or the sebum on your skin. In addition to contributing to the acid mantle, it also prevents cracks in your skin. Think about maybe in the winter if your skin gets really dry and it cracks open. Well, that's an open invitation for pathogens to come in and infect you. So the oil is what prevents cracks in your skin. Then here is that Merocrine sweat gland. And remember, this sweat contains lysozyme, which inhibits pathogen growth. You also have lysozyme in your tears and saliva. Then here's our picture of the epidermis up close. So if we focus in on the epidermis, remember those top cells fall off. And this is kind of a self-cleaning function. So if these are a bunch of germs here that are on it, when that falls off, the germs fall off with it. And a fresh, clean layer underneath is exposed. Then also, this whole area is dead cells. You have about 30 layers of dead cells here. Well, that is also protecting you from infection. They're already dead, so they can't be infected. So they are a barrier between the germs that are in your environment and your living tissues that are vulnerable to infection. Remember also, the entire epidermis is avascular. It doesn't have any blood vessels. So it's also creating a barrier between germs and your blood. And finally, remember this, the epidermal dendritic cell. This is an immune cell that will kill pathogens that do try to enter through your skin. So maybe if you do get a little cut or scrape or something up there on the surface that gives an opening for germs to get in, that epidermal dendritic cell is there to kill them. So most of this is review. You've heard these things before, but now you have it all together here, a list of ways your skin is protecting you. Then finally we'll move on and we'll look a little bit at hair. Hair is an outgrowth of your skin. So first we'll look at the stages of hair growth. So you probably know you lose hair all the time, and especially if you have long hair, it's very noticeable, right? Your hairbrush is full of hair, it's all over the furniture, it's on your clothes. If you have short hair, you're still losing your hair, you just don't notice it as much. But you lose about 100 hairs a day. Now, you're not bald, even though you lose 100 hairs a day, because you also make 100 new hairs per day. So your hair goes through this constant cycle of regeneration. So we start off with step 1 here, a new hair grows. And this can take, on average, about 2 to 5 years. So a new hair will spend about 2 to 5 years growing. How long it spends is genetic. So think about, there are some people who can grow really long hair, like hair down to their knees. There are other people that can go years without getting a haircut and their hair just won't grow long. That's because of your genetics. If you have genetics for only 2 years of hair growth, your hair's never going to get very long. It'll only grow for 2 years and then it stops growing. So you can't get much accumulated growth in 2 years. And there are all these scam websites and stuff that try to sell you vitamins that'll make your hair grow and all that nonsense. Don't waste your money. It's your genetics. No pill you're going to buy and take is going to give you hair down to your knees if your genetics make your hair stop growing after 2 years. The people who do have really long hair are at the 5 year. And it can even, this is 2 to 5 years as an average. Not everybody falls in the 2 to 5 year range. There are extremes at both ends. So you can be at 5 or even more years. That's how you get really long hair. So then once the hair is done growing, then it goes dormant. So it stops growing, but it is still in your head. And this will last a few months. Then finally, the hair falls out. And a new one starts growing to take its place. So then this new one goes back up here to step 1. And if you look closely at your hair, you'll see you have some shorter ones. Not all of them are as long as your total hair length. Those shorter ones are the younger ones that are replacing your ones that fell out, and they're still in that growth phase and they're catching up. Okay. Another thing with hair is newborn babies. Think about if you've ever been around a newborn. A lot of times they tend to have kind of really hairy shoulders, or like their lower back is really hairy. Or if you've ever been around a premature baby, they can have very hairy all over the whole body. They can almost look like a little ape. So a fetus is actually covered in hair, almost kind of like an animal, like a little monkey would be covered in hair. And that hair is called lanugo. Most of this will fall out before they're born. Okay, it is common for a full-term baby to still have some on the shoulders or the lower back. And a preterm baby may have been born before it fell out. So a preterm baby will have lots of lanugo yet. And an interesting thing, if you've ever had kids, you know those first few diaper changes have meconium in them. And if you don't have kids, but you plan to in the future, now you'll know what's going on. Meconium is what their poop is for the first few days. So this is this kind of black, tar-like poop. It's very sticky. It's hard to clean off of their skin. The reason they have this poop the first few days is from the lanugo. So a fetus is floating around in the amniotic fluid. The fetus drinks the amniotic fluid. Shortly before they're born, the lanugo falls out. And when it does, it's floating in the amniotic fluid. And when the fetus drinks the amniotic fluid, they ingest the hair with it. So they're basically eating that hair that fell out. And that's what becomes the meconium. The meconium is digested hair. And another thing, when a woman's in labor, labor is very stressful. It's stressful on the mom. It's also very stressful and painful on the fetus. And if it is a particularly stressful labor for the fetus, that can cause the fetus to poop before they're born. Ideally, they wait and they poop out that meconium after they're born. But if the labor is going really hard, the fetus might poop while they're born. Before they're born. This is a very dangerous situation. So this is why when a woman's in labor, they check the amniotic fluid to make sure it's clear. Because if the fetus poops before they're born, then that poop is in the amniotic fluid, and then that poop gets into their nose and mouth, and then it can get into their lungs and cause a very dangerous infection in the lungs. So they check the amniotic fluid to make sure that it's clear while a woman is in labor. Because if the meconium is in the amniotic fluid, then it can get into the mouth and nose, and from there into the lungs, and it can cause an infection. You don't want poop in your lungs. And if that does happen, then luckily if you're having the baby in a hospital, the doctors are right there and they will do immediate medical treatment to save the baby's life. But if you don't have medical treatment, that can actually kill the baby from having that meconium get in there. All right, then the last one here, male pattern baldness. So both men and women can go bald, but it is more common in men than in women. And there are several factors that go into this. I'm just going to cover one of those several factors. One of the many factors is hormones and how hormones interact with genetics. So men have testosterone. Women have estrogen. Okay, then we have genetics comes into play. So hopefully you've had previous biology classes, high school science classes, you've learned about dominant and recessive alleles. Right? Remember Punnett squares and use capital letters and lowercase letters? So we have baldness, or we have keeping your hair. One of these is dominant, one of these is recessive. Which it is depends on if you're a man or a woman. Testosterone makes baldness the dominant trait. Whereas the lack of testosterone, such as in women, makes keeping your hair the dominant trait. Okay, so think about your Punnett squares and what you learned about like genotypes, where you write the 2 letters. If you have one of each, if you are heterozygote, you have one allele for being bald, one allele for keeping your hair. If this is a man, he will go bald because testosterone makes baldness the dominant trait. If this is a woman, she will keep her hair because the lack of testosterone makes baldness the recessive trait. And you may see those commercials on TV for the pills you can take to stop baldness or prevent baldness. If you pay close attention, those commercials say that they block DHA. That is a type of testosterone. So the way those anti-baldness pills work is they block that type of testosterone that's interacting with the gene and making you lose your hair.